We're going to tie a Juju Baetis. This is one of my oldest flies. This fly's been around for about 20 years or so, and it's obviously an offshoot of my Juju midge, and adapted to be a Baetis nymph. It can be tied in a lot of different colors, red and brown, brown and black, which is the original version, which I've got right here, brown and orange for a PMD nymph. Purple and blue is a good attractor color. Obviously, the colors are not limited. Super Hair comes in a pile of colors, and you can mix and match those at your discretion. But what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the Umpqua 2488, and I'm going to tie you a size 16 just because it's big enough to show up on the screen well. And I'm going to use some 16-aught white Umpqua thread, which I know I keep using stuff you can't get anymore, and I've got it in my bag, so I keep using it. But Vivus 14-aught will work just fine here. And I'm going to start the thread just a couple eye lengths back from the hook eye. And I'm going to wrap back about halfway down the bend, and I want to keep the thread as flat and smooth as I can as I go. And for the tail, I'm just going to use, this is an India hen saddle feather, India hen back, and I've stripped the fluff off the bottom, and I'm going to pull out a little clump of these fibers, about 10 or 12 of them, and I want a little clump. Got a broken one in there. I'll pull them out at a right angle so that their tips become even. I'll grab that clump and kind of pull the feather away. So I've just got this short little bunch, and I'll tie this in about a half shank long, about like so there at the bend, and then I'll wrap forward over those butt ends. And I want to try to keep those butt ends on top of the hook as I go. Back up to about where I started, and then I'll trim those stub ends out. Now for the body, I'm going to use Super Hair. And Super Hair is a synthetic material generally used in saltwater flies. It's a kinky nylon. It's like a thin monofilament almost, but it's got a kink to it. And I'm going to use two colors. The whole basis of the Juju series is two colors of Super Hair. And in this case, I'm going to use 2 strands of brown and 1 strand of black. So I've got these 3 lined up. And I'm going to cut the ends so that they're square. Give you a little more light here. I'm going to catch these here just at this front end on my near side of the hook, and I'll draw them down to length and anchor them in place, and then I'm going to wrap back over them all the way back to the base of the tail. And as I do this, I want to again keep that thread as flat and smooth as I can as I go, so that I don't have a lumpy bumpy underbody. I want this as smooth as I can get it. Once I get to the bend, I'll come forward again, and on the size 16 I'm going to build a little bit more of a taper obviously than I would on a 18, 20, 22. So I want to build a little bit of a taper here on this front end, and you can see I manage my thread twist. I tie left-handed, so I don't get too much thread twist unless I make a bunch of wraps in a row. If you tie right-handed, you're probably going to need to manage that thread twist a little bit more. But what I've got there is a nice smooth underbody that's about a half size down from where I ultimately want the body. We've still got some Super Hair to wrap over this, and at the end we're going to coat this with UV resin, so we don't want to overbuild that body. I usually cut all 3 strands to the same length. It just makes them easier to keep track of. And I'll sort of rock all 3 of these strands together back here at the bend to get them lined up, and you can see that they're lined up there. It doesn't matter what order they're in. And I'm going to bring this first turn around, and again I'll just kind of keep rocking them to get them aligned. And I'll get that first turn around the hook. Sometimes you'll end up with just, I don't know if you can see that, just a little space. You can kind of pull those back together to tuck those wraps in. And once you've got the first set lined up, if you hold everything close to the hook as you wrap, you can just wrap this forward flat like a ribbon, right up over that underbody. And you can see I'm holding it very close to the hook to build this segmented body up to the front end where I started the thread. And then I can tie that Super Hair off with a few turns of thread. Now I'll take all 3 strands and clip those out. If you run those through your mouth and wet them, they'll stick together. You can set them aside for the next fly. And typically when I'm sitting down to tie a batch of these, I'll do all the abdomens and then come back and do all the thoraxes. So I'll whip finish that white thread and clip it out. But since you don't want to wait for me to do another dozen abdomens, I'm going to go ahead and start this black thread. So this is just black A-dot uni. I'm going to start this just in front of where I tied off the white. I'll clip my tag out. I'm going to overlap back to about 60-40, so I'm running the abdomen and thorax together pretty plainly there. And I'm going to tie in some flash. And what this flash is Opal Mirage tinsel. And this is medium size. So I'm going to take a piece of this, and any of the tinsels that come off of a spool have a curve to them. So anytime you've got a curved piece of material, always tie it in with the curve down, curve toward the hook. If I tie it in this way, that piece curls around and is in the way while I'm trying to tie the rest of the fly. It only took me about 10,000 of these to figure out to tie this in curved down, so I'll pass that along to you and save you some trouble. So what I'm going to do to tie this in is I'm going to stand this up on the near side here and let my thread roll it to the top. And I'll just catch it with just a turn, maybe two, but just a turn, and then I can sort of tweak this end to get it lined up right on top of the hook. And I've got to do that here on my side so that it's square up on top of the hook. Then I can wrap down over the stub ends to lock that in place. For the wing case, I'm going to use some gray fluorofiber. And fluorofiber is a very fine crinkled material. Makes perfect legs on little Baetis nymphs and midges. Comes in a bunch of colors. And I'm going to take a dozen strands. So on a size 16, I'm going to use 12. On a 22, I might use 8. 20 might be 10. At 18, you can kind of go either way. But what I've done there, the reason I counted them is so that you have a general idea. You don't have to count them every time, but count them once anyway, just so you know what 12 looks like. It looks a lot more like this than it does like that. And that's one of the most common things I see is way too many strands. So I'm going to move my thread back here a bit. I'm going to catch those strands, and I'm going to draw them down so that they're just behind the hook eye. And then I'll wrap over them right up to the base of that wing case. I usually go maybe one extra thread wrap back just to make sure that everything's butted. And then I'll start to build my thorax. And my thorax here is just going to be sort of an egg shape of thread. I'll fatten them up a little bit. And again, a 16 is fatter than an 18 or a 20 would be. And I want to leave myself some relatively bare shank up here behind the hook eye. So now I'm going to fold the wing case forward. So I'll pull that fluorofiber forward, and I want to pull it taut. And I'll bring my thread over the top, but I'm going to keep that fluorofiber tight so that it holds the thread up off of the hook, and then I can pull straight down on the thread to center that wing case, and I'll lock it in with one more turn. I'm going to take my flash forward and catch it with the turn, and then put one more. Then I'll fold the front end back and catch it again with a couple of turns. And that just keeps that flash from ever pulling out. So now I'm going to divide my butt ends, 6 to a side because I know I've got 12. And I'll kind of roll them in my fingers here, and that helps to divide them. I'm going to pull the near side back just slightly low on the hook and let my thread drag it up to in line with the shank. Just get a turn or two. And on the far side I'll hold just a bit high so my thread drags it down. Then I'll cover those butt ends, and I can come in and whip finish right on top. Now the thread head on this fly should be slightly oversized. I can clip that thread out now. Now we're going to do the wing case and legs, or clip out the flash. So I'm going to come in and just nick the edge of the flash. Once we've clipped that flash off, we can trim these legs. So I'm going to pull these legs back and trim them just about a scissor blade width longer than the wing case. If you wet those fibers, they'll stick together and be ready for the next fly. So now to finish this off, we're going to put a little top coat of resin on it. And what I use is Solarez Thin Hard. And I'm going to take a little drop on a short needled bodkin. We have these made for us by Brian Schmidt now. Dennis Collier was the originator. And the short needle bodkin makes it a lot easier to put a small drop and place it on a fly rather than a long needle where you're trying to do everything from way back here. So I'm going to sweep these legs down. I'm going to put this drop down just on the top of the wing case. You can see I kind of bounce the needle. And I'm going to bounce all the way back to the bend and then sweep forward. Then I can kind of work back and forth, making sure I coat the entire entire upper surface here. I want to be up onto the thread head and kind of get a teardrop shape going. And once I've got that shape, I'm going to cook that with my UV lamp. And you can see, immediately once you put that resin on there, that magnifies the flash as well as the segmentation on the ribs. I've got those legs just a touch long. I'm going to knock them down one more time. And that right there, my friends, is why you have sharp scissors. So short little stub legs on either side, just a touch longer than the wing case. And that's our finished Juju Baetis. It's a really a near perfect mayfly nymph imitation, particularly in small size stuff. The original color here, this brown and black, is the one that I fish most often. If I see fish sitting in a riffle, this fly goes directly on my tippet, and they eat it nearly every time. I also tie it in 2 red with 1 brown. Everything else is the same. 2 purple and 1 blue, and 2 brown and 1 orange. I'm sorry, 2 orange and 1 brown for a PMD nymph, which is right at home on this size 16 hook. But a pretty versatile fly. You can tie a bunch up. It's really, really a pretty fly when it's all done. And when you put these in your hand next to the real critter, it's a dead ringer. There's a lot of imitations, a lot of knockoffs of this fly these days, but there's one original, and you're looking at it. So now you know. Twist some up, take them out there, yell my name when you catch some fish. I get so tired of hearing my name. Hopefully you get tired of yelling it. Have fun.